Thank you, Eva, for these really encouraging words that knowing the fact that the CU is really taking the new direction, but you're going to remain as supporters behind us. Now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, our colleague, friend, Judit Durst. Would you like to come here? Judit Durst is a sociologist, ethnographer, honorary research fellow at the University College London, UK, in the Department of Anthropology, and a senior researcher at the Center for Social Sciences of the Hungarian Academy of Science. She had been a faculty member on CU Summer University's Romani Studies program for many years and had served on the scientific committee of the European Academic Network on Romani Studies. Her research focuses on social inequalities, marginalization, educational, social, and geographical mobility, reproductive decision-making, and recently, economic anthropology. She has led a research project funded by the Hungarian Academy of Science on the price of social mobility, the outcomes of high academic achievement for Roma and non-Roma Hungarian first-generation professionals. She's currently a principal investigator on a national research project on the moral economy of dependent relations, rethinking dependence and livelihood in the era of financialization in Hungary. She has published several academic papers and book chapters. Her most recent edited journal, Thematic Issues in English, are with Abel Bereményi and Zsuzsa Nyír. I suggest you to read those articles because these are really important and very inspiring and encouraging for us as well. So I'm not going to read more because it's really a rich achievement what you did, and we are really grateful that you can be with us and deliver your keynote speak today. So you did. This is your.
Until Marci is trying to do the PowerPoint, I will start with my first slide, my positionality and where I'm coming from, because it really affects the way how I see the topics of my research, how I collecting data, and how I interpret my data. First of all, Angela and Esther and everybody, thank you so much for having me here. It's an absolute honor to be among you, especially after our research project with Romani, Juliana Boros and Abel Bereményi, who will present this afternoon, our research findings, when we have interviewed 105 Hungarian Roma first-in-family graduates who were the first in their family who could achieve a high education certificate. And speaking with them, I have all my respects to you guys. So the way that how racialization condition the trajectory of those who are coming from not only working class, but from racialized minorities, it's horrendous. So many of our interviews were basically trauma story. And many of our interviewees expressed their gratitude to us that we somehow address this topic. So my positionality, I would like to start with just a story from yesterday. For me, it was kind of a jaw-dropping story. Maybe for you, it's an everyday one. I had a meeting with some of my, I live in London. I'm from Hungary, I live in London. I have 4 children. I thought I know what I'm speaking about when I'm speaking about the glass ceiling, but I have no clue. I just understood from this story what it means to suffer from the racial glass ceiling. So the story is that I met a friend who is a personal trainer, as our joint friends call him, an old school English guy, very conservative English guy. And he cautiously told me a story about him meeting some Eastern European Roma, an Eastern European Roma couple on the tube who behaved outrageously. And I understood that he tries to keep back half of the story because he knew I'm researching Roma communities in Hungary. And then he just told me that, you know, I mean, I don't want to be stereotypical, but the way they speak, and as soon as they open their mouths, I know that they are from Eastern Europe, and because they are Black, I know they're Roma. And I said that, oh, James, but as soon as I'm open my mouth, you know that I'm not English as well. You know that I'm Eastern European. And he said, no, you are one of us. And I said, wow, what do you mean? You are white middle class, your accent just makes you exotic, but you are one of us. That was the first time when I experienced what it means to be exotic. I always wanted to work on my accent, but after a while I completely gave up. Some people think I'm French. This is the worst judgment. French people really cannot be understood very well. Even worse if they think I'm French, well, I'm Spanish, but it's kind of a compliment on the other hand, to be a lady, French, Spanish, so I don't mind. But to be exotic, wow, because of my accent. Anyway, so then I realized that the lens of intersectionality that we absolutely always use in our research, it's like unavoidable. So a white middle-class woman will never understand the ratio, what the double or extra thing, what a racial glass ceiling means. Having 4 children myself, I absolutely experienced how the glass ceiling works. But the extra layer, what it means to be people of color and women, I will never ever be embodied this experience. That's one limitation. The other is, it's not a limitation, it's just my situation. It's just my positionality, which I think it's very important to note. That's where I'm coming from. The second positionality is that I'm very much involved in ethnographic field research in marginalized, very poor Roma communities. I started my field work 20 years ago as part of, together with Eva Fodor, as part of a very inspiring international team, studying the effect of the intersection of poverty, feminism, and ethnicity. And I think this intermittent 20 years living or being in close contact with huge breaks because of my kids, because some of the kids were born during this time, absolutely formed me, shaped me as a researcher. And just telling you one story, that during that 20 years, it's a community of 800 people. When I started, it was 60% non-Roma Hungarian and 40% Roma, and 40% non-Roma Hungarian, 60% Roma. Nowadays, there are only 2 Hungarian families. With all the EU development projects, they managed to create kind of a Roma ghetto out of a settlement with a lot of development aid and money. And when I'm saying this research shaped me a lot, it's because I became with this illusion about development projects. I became like kind of pessimistic what we can do. During that 20 years, none of the youngsters managed to accomplish secondary school. So I think it's kind of a devastating data. This year, the very first girl, she's 14, got into a grammar school, but only for a subsidiary branch of the grammar school, study to be a nursery teacher with the help of one of the educational support program, the Roma Talent program. And it's only because I tried to channel her towards help, because seeing her as part of a 7 kids family, struggling with sometimes starvation during the couple of last days of the month, she couldn't have done it without the support of this program. And then I bumped, and then I just being so disillusioned, It was very inspiring when last week I attended to a seminar in London about alternative universities. And I bumped into the concept of critical hope. And I think this is something that can be so inspiring for us who are dealing with higher education and how higher education can challenge the structural inequalities against racialized minorities. What does this concept mean? It's coming from Paulo Freire, and it means it's absolutely not a naive and romanticizing concept. It means an awareness of reality, that we have to recognize the current oppressive conditions of social injustices without resigning to them. It means a critical engagement, actively questioning and challenging the status quo. It means a commitment to change, a belief in the possibility of transformation, and it's a dynamic and participatory. And it urges all of us individuals to reflect on circumstances and to engage in transformative action. I believe why Angela asked me to be the keynote speaker, it's on the basis of our two current research projects. So one is with a huge team, like we were like 8 researchers in the team. It's a national funded by the former Hungarian Academy of Sciences, about the social mobility, ethnicity, so the education-driven social mobility and its social costs and consequences and the different trajectories between different ethnic groups, minorities and majorities. And the other project that I did with Romani from this research project was that we made a special issue from different racialized minorities from very various geographical settings. And today I will talk to you about the results of these two research projects. The results of this special issue was published in the journal Compare, which is an international educational journal, and all the papers tackle the issue of the educational mobility of the racialized minorities, obviously from an intersectional perspective. And they all found that many of these racialized minority groups use a minority culture of mobility, or as we call it, the minority trajectory of mobility, because we really would like to avoid the essentialization of the concept of culture. And it means to establish various strategies in order to gain better opportunities in a hostile environment. And some of the findings shows that the benefits of upward educational mobility do not necessarily reflect outside in the general society, but sometimes within one's ethnic social group. I will give you an example from one of the paper, which is the authors was Mendoza et al. My father says, my daughter is doing well, she's studying, she's doing something important. And in fact, he now talks more to me than to my brothers. Brothers are just finished primary schools. One day I found my mother arguing with my older brother, and she said, tell your brother to get up and look for work. Let's see if he listens to you. So this is a lady, middle-aged, in her 30s, not middle-aged, and of Moroccan descent in Spain. So Mendoza et al. Argue that racialized minorities of Moroccan descent in Spanish higher education not necessarily gain a better status in the general Catalan society, but definitely gain a better status in their own ethnic group. They get more respect as a lady, and they can recast their traditional gender roles. What we have found in this special issue, that the evaluation of higher education by these racialized minorities can be very context dependent. It can be as a false promise or as a camouflage social mobility. Part of the reason why it is that there exist an essentialized ethnic expectations, the cultural expectations in higher education. As Wallace put it, it's although culture functions as a seemingly race-neutral code, it has re-emerged as an acceptable way of defining differences between groups and drawing distinctions within them. It serves as a way of obfuscating race by reproducing racial and ethnic hierarchies. Julia Szalai also spoke about the ethnic ceiling, which meant that teachers have very low expectations on the basis of ethnic stereotyping, that Roma will always have low achievement at schools. It's the same with some Black American communities. And these cultural explanations of racialized students' school achievement absolutely obscure the historical, structural, and institutional factor that shape these students' experiences. However, as it turned out from the other papers of this special issue, higher education also can serve as sites for transformation. It can empower minoritized students by promoting personal development and a broader understanding of the world and society that encompass them. Some of our interviewees who were participants of or mentees of not only one, but sometimes more educational support program, for example, the Roma Versitas and the CU Roma Access program, always express their gratitude how empowered they became due to the effect of these programs. One of them said, like, I became equipped with a new language to interpret and understand the oppression of our people. I realized it's not my parents' fault that we lived in such a poverty. And the other effect of higher education was that oppressed minority youth expressed how they could reconfigure or recast their identities. And they could negotiate their gender roles. Angela wrote a lot about it, but the Spanish colleagues wrote as well regarding the Islam women. And one of the quotes, I think it's quite telling. It's again from these Moroccan descent Spanish ladies in higher education. I went to the library, I found a book by Fatima Mernessi. Then I found another book that opened life up to me. The title was The Emergence of Islamic Feminism. So these ladies absolutely reconfigured the meaning of Quran, and they created a new version, a modernized version of Quran, calling the Islamic feminism. The other research project I will just really address very shortly, because Juliana Boros and Gianna Nieder are research members. Will talk about it in details in the afternoon. It was a 4-year research project, and it explored education-driven actual mobility trajectories, their outcomes, and their corollary prices. And we were interested in the hidden or emotional costs of changing social class among first-in-family graduates in Hungary. For us, it was important to put together a research team through also a perspective of intersectional knowledge production. So we had younger and middle-aged women and men, Roma and non-Roma researchers in the team. And it was very important that our Roma researchers were invited in the team, not because of their identity, but because of their expertise. So Juliana Boros was an expert of the Roma educational programs. That's how she joined the group. And I think it was really important that we kind of exchanged and debated a lot over the findings. And I really think that our different positionalities helped us to get a bit more nuanced interpretation of the data. Our approach was challenging the neoliberal discourse about social mobility, which is dominated by the myth of meritocracy. It's full of the vocabulary of aspiration, ambition, choice, and it considers mobility as an individual project. So I think many of you always meet the saying that if you could make it, why your Roma other friends or community members couldn't make it. This is kind of the fallacy of the meritocracy, because as it turned out during the research project, that absolutely not only the merit, the talent of our interviewees, help them condition their way of upward social mobility, but 81% of them were beneficiaries or mentees of Roma educational programs. I think this is a very significant data because on the other hand, from the Hungarian non-Roma, only 12% took part in an education program. So it means that for the Roma, it was absolutely crucial that these programs existed. So instead of this neoliberal discourse, we asked.
You can hardly hear at the back.
Really?
Very
You could
quiet.
have said it earlier, sorry.
No, we've all been listening. But
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better.
Can you hear it?
We can hear your voice. Nevertheless, the micro is not working.
Really?
Online they can hear it, but in the room there is no amplification.
Okay, then I'm
yet.
speaking louder. So instead of the
Sorry, it's very hard to hear something from you.
Yeah.
So can you be a little bit louder?
Okay. So instead of the meritocracy, the mythos of meritocracy, we ask how individuals experience mobility in a context where institutional racism has long been widespread. The Hungarian context is that ethnic gap is huge in educational attainment. Only 1% of the Roma possesses university degree, meanwhile 17% of the Hungarian population does. And I don't want to talk much about the cost of social mobility because we wrote a lot about it, and I think Juliana and Jana will talk about it. But one important concept that we used is Bourdieu's definition of habitus, which is a system of dispositions that is of permanent manners of being, seeing, acting, and thinking. And habitus is a socialized subjectivity. Why is it really important for us is that we find a mismatch between the habitus of a working class people and the field of the middle class or academic institutions and then labor market institutions. And it really resulted in sometimes painfully dislocated habitus. And we identified 4 main trajectories of the first-in-family Hungarian Roma first-in-family graduates on the basis of their different incorporation into the Hungarian society. There was very few who took the assimilated mobility trajectory. Okay, this is one of the limitations that this kind of research is. We'll not find those who don't want to be taking part in a research like that, but we did find some assimilated Roma trajectories. Some of them were abroad. They worked as like Hungarian history teachers, and they were suffering as a former mentees of this Roma educational program that they couldn't give back to their community. But some didn't suffer from anything. They were in the business sector, and they thought that they did their job by supporting their extended big families with their money that they earned in the business sector. Then what I would like to talk about today is the minority mobility trajectory, which we identified 3 elements of it. One is the recasting of identity, meaning that it's reconstructing being Roma as a pride, as a source of pride, instead of being something that's like this a shameful identity. Some of them said it like, I'm still a gypsy, but in a different way. So we found Gibson's concept, accommodation without assimilation, absolutely useful in this sense. And many of them said that we have a foot in 2 different worlds. I'm accommodated into the Hungarian culture, but obviously I have my Romani culture from my community. The second element of this minority mobility trajectory is that many of these minoritized groups created ethnic organization, and it really mitigated the price of that changing class and of their navigating in a hostile, racialized institutional field. These ethnic organizations help them to create the feeling of belonging it provided them emotional shelter, and it mitigated the psychological cost of their changing class. And the third element of this minority mobility trajectory is giving back to the community. And how we argued is that these support programs, Julia Boros will talk about it in details, but the main argument of us is that one of the main benefits of these Roma educational support programs is that they equip their mentees with the so-called Roma cultural capital. And we understand this concept as similar to Black cultural capital, Wallace coined this term, and Carter, an ethnographer, in a sense that it represents a pool of resources that middle-class Roma youth can benefit from in order to give their Roma identity a positive meaning. With this complex approach, Roma education programs make a significant contribution to alleviating the cost of upward social mobility of their beneficiaries. It's really important that they accrue this Roma cultural capital because the main discourse or the public discourse about first in family generations, working class students and Roma is speaking with a deficit view, meaning that they miss the middle class cultural capital that is needed to facilitate their social mobility. We argue that there exists a non-dominant and alternative cultural capital, which people of color absolutely possess, and that really helps them to navigate in this hostile and sometimes unfamiliar environment such as higher education provide. And this is called by also the community cultural capital or community wealth. So we argue that against the deficit view, that especially these educational support programs are really, really strong to create or accrue this non-dominant alternative cultural capital. But there is a limitation according to the narratives of our interviewees, but I'm sure you are absolutely aware of it, that sometimes it means a burden of giving back to the community. Many of them say, I'm just not reading it aloud, but many of them say that it's absolutely okay if it's a self-driven desire, but sometimes they feel, especially from the majority society, the expectation that those Roma who achieved like to be professional, they have an obligation to give back. But this is absolutely against what Sarah Ahmed argues, that education is not a gift, education is a right for everyone. So no one should give back unless it's coming really as an inner drive from themselves. So one of our interviewees put it that I absolutely have all my respect to my close friends who work for Roma issues, but myself, who come from a very poor community with a lot of trauma, with a lot of inferiority complex, with a lot of imposter syndrome, please let me be me, and please let me just try to sort out my own private life, which is still full of a lot of trauma therapy and a lot of struggle to live in a society where to be a Roma is, to say the least, not easy. Anyway, this interviewee already left the country because of her children experience absolute institutional racism already in the nurseries. And now I just have some questions for the panel after me. One of the questions is that, what do you think, an educational support program challenge the racial glass ceiling, or how they can challenge the structural inequalities that exist in higher education field? And what do you think, within the belly of the beast that are universities operating in the neoliberal higher education regime, where students are paying enormous tuition fees, are there possibilities for any meaningful changes? And in this context, where the focus is on technically competent dissemination of information, intellectual knowledge becomes regarded as too difficult or irrelevant, what is the future of teaching critical social sciences? Is it true that education for democracy, equality, and justice seems ever remote in the context of marketized higher education? Or on the contrary, universities are still important places to contribute to imagining alternatives? Another question, whether we agree with bell hooks, that the classroom still remains the most radical space of possibility in the academic. In 2010, UK students and faculty protested against the university funding cuts. Some of the educational scholars called it a politics of possibility, because this resistance, according to them, showed the demand for a politics and a pedagogy that displaces cynicism with hope, challenging the neoliberal notion that there are no alternatives with vision of a more just society. So what do you think? What do we think about developing a pedagogy of commitment that foster critical literacy and agency to social responsibility? According to our interviewees who took part in CU Roma access programs, and then especially CU MA social science courses, they speak highly about the critical thinking, the critical literacy that they gained in CU, and many of them, they said that it was their time of awakening. And the last three questions, or we cannot stay in the mainstream, but we can just be on the margins in some kind of third spaces, as we put it in with Abel in our paper on Roma education programs as like actors in third spaces that can help to mitigate the price of changing social class and can be transformative in challenging social injustice. So what do we think? Whether we should stay in the mainstream or it's better to be on the margins, and bell hooks and Angela Davis said, where we can transform changes and where we can challenge the reproduction of inequality in higher education, or how these alternative third spaces can counter existing power relations and contribute to a more just society. Another question is, what would alternative universities look like? What can we learn from the model of Olive? What would be the reparative education in the field of higher education? And the last one is how Roma education support programs can at the same time accrue invaluable Roma cultural capital to facilitate and nurture critical hope, but also free their mentees from the emotional burden of giving back. Yeah, these are the questions for the panel following. Thank you so much for your attention.
Actually, we planned a very short break, but before we're going to go for the humanitarian break, so if you have any kind of questions, comments, what you would like to make, or already answered to some of the questions which were raised by Judit. One? No? No? Then let's have a break and we can start at Marcy 45. Okay, thank you.